Hey everyone, for my book review too, I chose to read The Helmet for My Pillow. Now here's the book. Make sure y'all can see it. Now this book was written by Robert Leakey. It was published by the Random House in 1957. Now this edition of the book was published in 2018. Now this book isn't a very hard read. The first chapter can be a little challenging because they use a lot of terms that are military. They have some abbreviations in there. If you are not used to military terms, it can be challenging. I found some of them challenging in the first chapter. Now, after the first chapter, I found the book got easier to read, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the first chapter as well, even though it was harder at times to understand. It wasn't that hard, though, to be honest. So I really enjoyed it, and it was an easy read. It's not that thick of a book, and the words are not super small, so you can see them well. It's only a 250-page book. So this book right here took me, I read maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. So I read about 50 pages to 100 pages a day. It took me about 3 days to read. Now yesterday I sat down and I finished the book because I couldn't wait to see what the ending was. So it took me about 2 or 3 days to read it, all in all. So it wasn't that bad. Now, if you only read it a few minutes a day, it's going to take you longer. But I enjoyed it, so it took me 3 days to read it tops. So, I would recommend this book. Just because, especially if you like books that have to do with military, that are full of action, fighting. It tells about the battles he was in. It starts with him going to basic training, and it tells his story, his first-hand story as a Marine from basic training all the way through the battles that he fought during World War II. And it tells of the friendships that he made, and it tells some of the adventures they went on, and one that I found myself laughing out loud on is when he went to a bar, him and his friends, and him and I think his name was Chuckler is what he called him, and they decided to steal a case of beer, and so they whirred and snuck it as they thought they were sneaking it out of the door. Then they both grabbed it, positioned it, and ran. They ran across the road. They wound up falling and tumbling down a hill, but the bartender was there waiting on them and escorted them back. After he escorted them back, they returned it, and the bartender gave him a beer, and him and his friends sat there and enjoyed it, and then they went home. So would that happen today? Probably not, but that's what happened with them, and I found myself laughing out loud at how they were trying to do things, and it was just entertaining. I'm trying to think. So this book, how I related to this book. I thought about the times he was injured, and some of his friends was injured. It got me thinking about how I felt one time when my husband was deployed to Iraq. And they called us and told us that he had been hit when he was on a mission in Iraq, that they had drove over a roadside bomb, and that he had been hit. Him and his convoy had been hit. And so that's all they told us. But the one good news they gave us was he hadn't been flown out of country. That's all they could tell us, and they hung up. So we were left wondering, Is he really hurt? Is he going to be the same when he gets home? Which we knew he'd be changed anyways, but we were wondering, is he really hurt? What can we do to find out? There was nothing we could do to find out. So it was that wondering of what if. And it makes me think about the families of these soldiers, of these Marines in this book. They couldn't get a phone call from their soldier or from their Marine to say, hey, I'm okay, or hey, how are you doing? Because when Jared called me, he had no clue what was going on. And my first words out of my mouth was, thank God you're okay. I needed to hear your voice. They didn't get that with that. And sorry, I guess talking about it got me a little emotional because that's a hard story to tell. So it just makes me think about, how the family felt. They had to wait on letters, or they had to wait on a phone call from the higher ups, I guess you would say the people in intelligence or whoever. If they ever knew it, that they got hurt, they may have not ever found out unless the Marine or the soldier wrote home. So anyways, my point is that it made me think about how the families always sat at home and wondered, how their soldier was doing, or how their Marine was, if they were alive, if they were hurt, if they were hungry, because that is real things that families go through. Even today, when our loved ones are gone to war, we sit here and worry, are they hungry, are they cold, do they have what they need? Will we know if something happens? That is real worries that you face. And just reading when they would get hurt or things they were going through, it would touch me and make me think back to what I felt and my worries were when my husband was going to war. Okay, so one thing that made me stop and think was a quote that he used in the book, and I wrote it down so I can share it with y'all. So I'm going to read it to y'all. It says, my ears became my being, and I could hear the specks of the life that crawled beneath me, my clothing, the rotting of the great tree which rose from its three-cornered trunk above me. I could hear the darkness gathering against me, and the silences that led between the moving things. And that was by Robert Leakey. When I read that in the book, it made me think of what they actually went through. They didn't have houses. Some of them didn't get to sleep in tents. They dug holes in trenches where they would place their guns at the top, and they would be stationed there for nights, weeks, months. That's where they ate. They would sleep there. So they didn't have hardly any lights, because if they turned a light on, the enemy could see them. So they had to sleep in the pure darkness. So they would sit there and they would just think, if they'd hear anything, maybe an animal move, it would break a tree limb or something, or branch, and just the creak, they would think it was the enemy coming, and they were to sit there and wait to see who it was, or if the enemy was going to come and attack them. And so it was a constant worry or battle that the stress came to them because of that. With this book, my lesson plan that I was going to build around it has to do with World War II. We are going to look, I'm actually going to work with 6th grade on this one, and we're going to break down and look at the different wars, and we're going to look at the causes and the consequences of war and how they affect families and loved ones. But we're going to look at the cause and consequences it has on the soldiers as well. I will be using graphic organizers in this lesson to help break that down. And I'm going to have the students to do a project using poster board where they will take a war or one of the battles in World War II, and they will break it down and show what causes that the battle had, what consequences the battle had towards the war, what how it affected the soldiers, how it affected America, and different things like that. So that is my book review, and I did read this entire book, cover to cover, every word on every page. Thanks.